My, oh my, could that be Murder Mystery Mommy at it once again? My little pearls, my little petals, buckle up because I'm going deep with this episode. Listen, I rewatched a couple of other episodes from this season. I rewatched some episodes from last season. I may have even watched some of the movie references. So yeah, you're going to love this episode. Let's go. I've been saying Dudenoff is dead for how long? How long? And yes, I will go into detail as to how I think he died and what I think happened. Because, as usual, I have theories. Potentially delusional, potentially correct. I also said in my last video that it didn't feel right that the twins did this because it was very early on to find the culprits in a murder mystery, mid-season, it's not usual. And guess who didn't do it? The twins. The twins. Now, I've seen some comments, I think in my last video, someone was saying that they didn't think the print is a perfect match to the print of their boots. I still think it could be the print, and I will go over what might have happened. To be honest, I think we get the clue to what could have happened for them to leave the print at the windowsill or the radiator in the Dudenoff apartment. We get the clue to what they might have been doing to have their foot there, like at the very beginning of the episode when the brothers, sisters start narrating, basically. I will discuss it. And this is my final warning before we go into this. I will be probably taking a long time. I don't know how long this video will be because I'm currently recording it, but I'm expecting it to be long. So look at the time on the video to confirm. Possibly beware, but don't be scared. Sorry guys, I only have dad jokes in me and I wrote that on my script and I just had to do it. Just a final note before we dive into the episode. Every single episode in this season is titled after a movie. And by this point, I think it would be naive to assume that they're only taking plot points from these movies, because they are definitely taking theme and possibly even attention to detail, to shots, to sounds, to all this stuff. Because from the very first movie, Once Upon a Time in the West, the theme of the entire movie is revenge. It's a revenge story. So to introduce it and pay such close attention to it in the first or second episode, I think, is a clue. And more than that, this film is said to have one of the best openings in cinema history ever. And the thing is about that opening, because I wanted to watch it and then read some stuff about it, they introduce three main characters in that opening scene and they don't say a word. They don't say anything. You get introduced to them and their personalities based on the way they are shot and their behaviors in those shots. So to me, what this is telling us is pay attention. Pay attention to the way this is shot. Pay attention to the details, because there are a couple things in this season that don't kind of match up. I am thinking currently of two. One of them I know I will discuss later on in the video, and the second one is the way that the trio imagines things happening. So when we see the footprint on the radiator, there is this image of someone really thin, really tall, dressed really cool, positioning themselves to take the shot. And I think that's misleading because we don't know that the person who did that was dressed like that. Last episode, we saw this image again, but this time it had a face. It had one of the brother-sisters' faces. But again, this was Charles's imagination. We don't know that this is how it happened. And when I was rewatching last season, in the episode where they figure out what happened to Ben in the elevator, they show Ben in that trench coat, that beige trench coat, because that's what he was wearing when he got, shoved down the elevator shaft. But in the imagination shots that we see from Charles and the trio whenever they are figuring out clues, it's a dude in a black suit. So we can't just assume that the images we see from their imagination, they're like role play of how the crime happened. We can't assume those are the real images of how it happened. Probably they are not. And I've lost my train of thought, but yeah, that's what I wanted to say about the movies. And I will be discussing a few of them, a few of the details that are related to the movies and the season, but unfortunately, I don't have the time right now to watch every single movie and analyze everything that I think is relevant. However, I will potentially do it after the season is over. Maybe before, if I have the time. We'll see. Now for the episode. From the beginning, and now I remember my train of thought from before, when I was talking about the way the trio imagines the crime. From the beginning in this episode, we are told to question what we see and the way the story is told, because we see a shot of one of the brother sisters in a jumpsuit as if she's been arrested or is in prison. And immediately we are told by the shot and by what we are seeing and by what we are hearing, we are told to assume that a lot of stuff has happened in between the last episode and this one, and she has been arrested. And now is, I don't know, breaking the fourth wall. I mean, you can kind of immediately tell that that's not what's going on. But the way that they frame the story and the way that they are telling us this story is making us jump into conclusions. And this is a point that is pointed out at least a couple times by Mabel in this episode. Stop jumping to conclusions. You cannot be sure of what you saw or what you think you saw or what you think you heard just from one tiny little clue. And I think this is a major theme for this season. Don't trust everything you see. Don't trust everything you hear. Because we're also having a major new player in the season, which is the characters from Hollywood. What is the first thing? What is the first image that you see when we go to the Hollywood setting in the Hollywood part of this season? We see a parody, hilarious parody, of New York being shot on a film in LA. There's a literal sign on the balcony of this woman in a heavy, like, New York accent. I don't know accents, I just know it's from New York. It just says diversity on the big poster. They're poking fun at it. And what is Hollywood known but to have 100, 1,000 different rumors flying around that are all lies? The literal movie and music industry relies on PR stunts and stuff that they just make up, like fights between people and romances between people just to promote movies and music. Basically, don't trust everything you see and hear. And this just leads me to that one theory. The one theory that I've been avoiding because I don't think it makes much sense. But I will be mentioning it over the course of this episode because more and more I feel like there are clues towards that theory, which is the theory that Sazz faked her own death. I will touch on it over the course of this video, and I think it's starting to make sense and it could be a possibility. And I just hope that if they do that, if Sazz is faking her own death, I really hope they have a great explanation as to how the police is involved. Because this is my biggest... Well, there's two. I have two reasons that really make me not believe that she's faking her death. One is the police involvement, because how would they explain that? You can't just waste police resources like that. Like, you need to... it's something that you can't do. I don't know if it's illegal, but there certainly would be consequences if you faked your own death, and like, could the police spend days, possibly weeks or months looking after you, spending resources and money and sending people. Like, I don't think that's something you can legally do or have no consequences for. And my second reason is Sazz's relationship with Charles. Either Charles was correct and the relationship that she was trying to get away from was the one with Charles, or it doesn't make sense. Because if Sazz loved Charles this much and really cared for him as much as he's telling us that she did and that we've seen over the seasons, if she really did care this much, why would she put him through this? These are my two, like, counter arguments to the Sazz faked her own death theory. But, I mean, there are clues. There are things that are pointing to that. And I don't know if it's the show trying to mislead us and be like, ho, I'm gonna send you in a goose chase, and then you're going to be mind-fucked by the reveal. I don't know. But I will start to seriously discuss the possibility that she could have faked her own death. There are a few things in this episode that I'm like, that's suspicious, you know? So now for the episode. From the very beginning, we start to learn more about the brother sisters, and we learn one very important thing. One of them says our aesthetic lives in the intersection between voyeurism and body horror. This in the episode called Blow Up, which, if you didn't watch my last video, is the title of the movie whose poster was in the writer's wall. In the previous episode, right at the beginning, we meet the writer at his apartment, and there's a poster of a movie from the 1960s, I think that's what it was. And the poster is for the movie Blow Up. Now, you ask, Joe, what the fuck is that movie about? Well, let me tell you. Again, that movie is about a photographer, I think a fashion photographer or a journalist or something like that, who is strolling by on a park and starts taking photographs of a random woman who starts chasing him so that he would stop taking photographs, but he just runs away from her, taking more photographs. And when he reveals those photographs, why am I saying photographs? When he reveals those photos, he discovers that he photographed a murder because he has a photo of a man lying dead in the bushes and he has a photo of a man in the bushes holding a gun. This photographer then goes to parties and meets people and keeps thinking about what he saw, and I think by the end or close to the end of the film, he goes back to the park and there's nothing there. It's basically about a person who accidentally witnessed and recorded a murder. And in my opinion, the biggest clue we get from the pairing of the title of this episode, Blow Up, about this movie, and the aesthetic of the sisters, which is voyeurism and body horror, the biggest clue we get from this is that they could have potentially accidentally filmed the murder. Or a murder. Because as we see in this episode, they are with their cameras all the time. They're always filming. And what I think that footprint is one of the brothers leaning in to the window to be able to film the windows of the other people on the East Tower. I think they could have accidentally filmed the murder. And I know you're asking, but how could they have filmed the murder if the shot came from the Dudenoff apartment and they were also at the Dudenoff apartment? Well, maybe the shot came from another apartment. Because what else do we learn in this episode? That even though the windows are shut, they can be pried open pretty easily. So the shooter could have been somewhere else. And I know what you're asking, but the casing was found at the Dudenoff apartment. I mean, it could have been planted. It was there for a week. However, yes, maybe they weren't there when the shooter was shooting. Maybe the shooter really did it from that apartment and they simply weren't there. So how could the footprint be there? Well, maybe they went before or after and just filmed someone on the windows on the other tower and left the footprint there. If you want the killer to be smart, they could have been there before looking for Dudenoff, found nothing, took a few recordings of the neighbors in the West Tower, left the footprint without even noticing, and then the killer came by, saw the footprint and thought, huh, that's a good way to divert suspicion from myself. Who knows? But I do think that's where the footprint comes from. And anyways, we find out who the Dudenoff dude is. The Dudenoff dude. He was a film professor who had 4 students at different times. Mind you, potentially the Westies might be lying. They clearly lie a lot. But who had as students the twin sisters, the Christmas all the time guy, the pink eye guy, and potentially others. And we also find out that Dudenoff is what? Very much dead and incinerated. Okay, but to the fun stuff, what do I think happened to Dudenoff? I thought it was very interesting that we see Christmas all the time guy and pink eye guy enjoying the, oh my god, what's that thing called? The drone that they buy off of a dead lady who was just hit by a bus, right? They don't seem to be sad that she died. They don't seem to have any kind of empathy towards her. They're just enjoying her toy. Now, I think this maybe is trying to make us partial to the idea that they could have offed Dudenoff, but I think something else might have happened. Because you see, even if they are callous people, they clearly cared about Dudenoff. I mean, he was their film professor, he was renting them apartments for cheap. I don't think these people would have killed him. But Dudenoff is not exactly young, wasn't exactly young. So what I'm thinking is, maybe he just died in his apartment, and the people who are closest to him in the building are the Westies. So they probably would have found him. They maybe just went to his house to play Ho Hell or something like that, and found him dead. Now, as a Westie paying peanuts for an apartment in New York, you have to wonder, what's gonna happen to my home once we tell the police and the hospital that this man has died? Who's going to inherit this? Because at this point, we don't know if Dudenoff has family. I'm willing to bet he doesn't. And as we've seen in this episode, the brothers-sisters were his favorite. They were his darling little, children, basically. And we also learned that the Westies don't particularly like the sisters. We also learned that the sisters have been cut off by Dudenoff for about 3 years. So, what were the Westies thinking? Well, they might be thinking that Dudenoff was going to leave the apartment to the sisters. And maybe they were afraid that the sisters wouldn't be so happy with the renting scheme and they would lose their homes. Because this is the feeling I've had since learning about the scheme, is that they have a lot at stake. It can't be easy facing the prospect of homelessness in New York. So I think they found him dead, and they are the ones who took him to the incinerator. I think there are tunnels that lead to the East Tower, and they knew about them because Dudenoff clearly has been in the building for a long time, and I think that's how they did it, and that's why Dudenoff's remains were with Sazz's remains in the incinerator. Side note on this, getting to know Dudenoff in this episode, I don't think he would have given all the apartments to the sisters. He probably would have left each respective person's apartment to them, and then left his own apartment to the sisters. But whatever. And in this case of them finding a dead Dudenoff and incinerating him, they would be the ones collecting the Social Security check. Because when Charles told Pink Eye Guy and Christmas All the Time Guy that Dudenoff was back in New York, they reacted very strangely. I don't know what kind of strange it was, but it was strange. So I'm assuming they know for sure what's going on with Dudenoff, and I think they're behind it. Remember the photo where Helga's face is scratched off? I think that Dudenoff took this photo, and took it recently because the teenage kid is still a teenage kid and not a kid. So I think this was somewhere in last season that he took this photo, and then he died, and the Westies incinerated him to save their renting schemes, and I think this is what led to the Helga breakup. Now, as for the timeline, I think all of this happened maybe a couple of weeks before the beginning of season 4. Right about that time when Ben died and Sazz started hearing the chatter about Charles on the ham radio. Now, this is what I think happened. Sazz, listening to the chatter on the radio, found Helga and found out about the Arconia, the West Tower, the Dudenoff business, everything that went on, and found out about the connection between the sisters and Dudenoff. I think at some point, living in LA, Sazz would have met the sisters, maybe went to their golf tournament, or somehow got in touch with them and talked to them about this, or even just deduced herself that Dudenoff might have been the reason why she was doing the movie. And this could have been the big problem with the film, because if they find out that Dudenoff is dead, and they have absolutely zero chance of ever reconnecting with him again, will they still be interested in making the movie? And can you make a movie without directors? Well, you can, but it will be shit. So this might have been what Sazz's message to Bev was. The big problem with the movie is the fact that the directors are only making it to be closer to their mentor, who is dead, so they might not want to do the movie after they find out. But I don't think this was the sensitive issue that Sazz was going to talk to Charles about, because if it was this, then she would have wanted to talk to the trio, because it would have affected all of them. Right? Now, with that said, I still think Sazz was shot because of what she was going to tell Charles that night. So I think that Sazz is the target. And yes, I will elaborate how this could be later. Now, a quick side note on the night that Charles, Jesus, my head is in the clouds. On the night that Sazz was shot. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that not everything is as it seems, and we can't take Charles's role play in his head of the crime as the actual crime, as what actually happened. Now, I mentioned the shooter having these really cool clothes and being tall and thin, but another thing that I noticed when I was rewatching, and I think someone has pointed this out in the comments before, because I remember reading it somewhere, that when Sazz is coming up to Charles's apartment and we see her opening the door, getting closer to the window and being shot, that is not Jane Lynch. And it's not the actor for Charles either. Look at that. It's not her. I've been trying to research their faces, see their angles, because on a profile, both Charles and Sazz have a nice line of a profile, and this person on their chin, it goes a bit like that, right? So it couldn't have been either of them. The two people that could have potentially been that person would be Bakula or Eugene Levi. Now, I don't know what sense it would make to put that actor there instead of Jane Lynch, because she wasn't available maybe to shoot that scene, but would they make such a big mistake? Because Sazz then appears dead on the floor. And we see her dead body, we see her drawing on the floor. So why was someone else filming the beginning of this scene? Tell me what you think. Was this a mistake? Or is this a clue? Because if it is a clue, it's once again leading me to the Sazz faked her death theory. And I don't like that theory. I don't like it. Now, about that shot. It was aimed at Glenn, potentially Ben, and it ricocheted from a metal plate in his head, right, into Zach's belly. And the trio thinks that this was aimed at Oliver and that Mabel could be next. I don't. Let's get into it. I think the first shot was aimed at Sazz, and I think the second shot could have been really aimed at Glenn. And to begin to explain this, I need to go back to episode 4, titled The Stuntman. And yeah, The Stuntman is a film. What is the plot of this film, you ask? Well, potentially relevant. This film is about a fugitive, a person fleeing from the law who hides on a movie set as a stunt double. And it gets better. Listen to this. The director in this film will do anything for the sake of his art. Remind you of someone? And it gets better, because in this film, the line between fiction and reality is blurred, to the point where the protagonist, this fugitive, starts to doubt everything that he sees and hears. Yep. So what I'm thinking is that in this entire season, where there are 100 doubles of everyone. There are theories about twins and twin theory galore. And we are, in my opinion, suggested to not trust everything we see and hear and just don't jump to conclusions and actually investigate and use evidence to back our theories. I think in a season like this, someone like Glenn, who is the stuntman introduced in the episode titled The Stuntman, I think Glenn's role is a lot more important than it seems. Listen, I just really want him to be Ben, because that would be the perfect silliness for this season, to be honest. And regardless of whether he's Ben or not, I think he could have been the target for the shot. Think about it. Logically, the trio was there. They were all there. And Mabel and Charles were standing together, clearly apart from everyone else. If they were all there, and Mabel and Charles are clearly more easily identifiable, why would the shooter pick Oliver to shoot if he's literally in between of two people who look like him? Also, there is a connection between Glenn and Sazz. They knew each other, they were part of the same stunt community, and as we have seen, it's not that big of a community, and they were close enough that they literally threw a funeral for Sazz. I think it's loose. I think there's still a big chance that Oliver was the target, but I have this fucking feeling that the entire season, the way it's been shot, the way it's been shown to us, the movie references is telling us, don't believe everything you see. And what was the promo? The entire promo about this is that someone is after Charles and the trio has to run away. Maybe I'm putting way too much faith in this show to subvert our expectations, but I don't know, it makes sense to me that there could be something else going on that is not about getting at the trio. Because, I mean, we see in the end that they are being surveilled. They have been under surveillance for days, possibly weeks. So why are they not being shot? If there is a person out there or a group of people out there who have these people in sight 24/7 inside their own homes where they are vulnerable, why have they not been shot? Like, if they know exactly where each of them is in their apartment, if they can get even close to them through the window, because, I mean, Mabel's bed is right by the window. Why are they not being shot? Why are they just being surveilled? They cannot be the targets. Maybe they are the targets in a different sense other than, to shoot them and kill them. Otherwise, why surveil them for so long and do nothing? And the only time they take a shot is when it's Sazz or Glenn. Also, if they were aiming at Glenn's head and they were looking through one of those things in one of those long range firearms, wouldn't they be able to tell that that's Glenn and not Oliver? Like, if they have the thing on his head, can't they see that this is not Oliver? I don't know. Maybe I'm just stupid and I don't know how firearms work because I'm not in the US. But yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. Now for the details. Number 1. When the detective, whose name I can't remember, Divine, when the detective says, if someone wanted to murder you for the past 3 years, I wouldn't blame them. Or I would understand. I'm sorry, what? Why are you putting these ideas in my head? I've been actively casting out the possibility that this has been in the making for years because I detest, with everything in my being, I detest the theory that Howard is behind everything. So why are you dropping these hints? Because I'm paying attention to everything. So now that you say this, I need to think about it. And what did I think about when she said this? I thought about Sazz's desk, because you know that I think, it is my opinion, my theory, that everything on that desk is relevant for this case. And what do we see at the desk when the trio goes to investigate Sazz's apartment? We see the freaking note saying sick pup. Who else remembers when Oliver had a sick dog in season 1? And there are so many pets in this season. We have Gravy, we had Hammy. What's with all the pets? Plus, one of the movie references, second episode movie reference, a movie that I haven't gotten around to watch, is called Gates of Heaven, Gates to Heaven, something like that. And it's a movie about what? About pet cemeteries. What is going on with the pets? I know this is relevant, I just don't know how. Please tell me your theories, because I need to investigate this more, potentially watch the film. I just don't know when. Note number 2. Why, oh why, did that one shot linger so much on the cup of bourbon? And why did Charles seem so apprehensive when he was asked about regrets? I mean, Oliver and Mabel basically came to his rescue and said, what about Jen? Do you regret her? But I think there was something else there. Guys, you know my theory about the past and how something that Charles did in the past is relevant to this. Charles, darling, what did you do? What did you do? We won't be mad. We just want to know, to solve the mystery. What did you do? Third note, am I the only one who found that box of Sazz's remains freaking silly? Because is that really how cremated remains are supposed to be called? Are they called cremains? That sounds so silly. I didn't know that that's how it was called. Is this just a joke, or is that how it's actually called? And how don't they have Sazz's date of birth? Why isn't it there? Like, I understand them not knowing exactly when she died, but even then, we know when she died. We know the day that the power went out. And also, by the way, now that I'm thinking about it, why did no one notice that the power went out when Dudenoff was cremated? Wait a minute. Did they do it at night or something? They must have. Huh. I'll be thinking about that one. Now back to the box. The thing that doesn't make sense, because cremains not having date of birth and date of death, and also it says cremation authorized by, and there are like 2 letters. What do you mean authorized? No one authorized her cremation. She was murdered. So how is there a signature or letters on the cremation authorized by? And it's just embarrassing. If this is true and is really how this happened, it's just embarrassing. Because tell me how the police couldn't figure out that there were 2 left shoulders in the remains? What kind of police is this? And this is another thing that tells me, wait a minute, maybe this isn't the police. Maybe the police isn't involved at all. Because how incompetent is the New York police supposed to be? I would say very competent. But this, not being able to figure out that one human being doesn't have 2 shoulders, that it's potentially the remains of 2 human beings. So of course I see some silliness like that and I think, oh, she faked her own death. And this is a clue that is planted for the trio to figure it out. And I'm just... I hope it isn't. I hope it isn't, because I feel like it's going to ruin the season a little bit for me. Let's see what happens. So let's discuss how all of this is connected. We know how Sazz is connected to the Dudenoff apartment because she was investigating whatever was going on with Charles, and that's how she got involved. She potentially found out about Dudenoff and what happened. Maybe she didn't know everything. It's unclear for now, but I'm pretty sure, solid on what went on with Dudenoff and the Westies and the renting scheme. Sazz stumbled upon that while investigating Charles, but my best guess would be that she figured out the shady stuff that was going on at the Westies, but also realized it probably didn't have much to do with Charles. However, figuring out the relationship between Dudenoff and the sisters, she got into a little bit of Charles' territory, and she figured out about the movie, that it might not happen, so she was trying to help Bev Mellon solve the situation, potentially. But then we have one thing, well, we have many things that are not explained, but we have one major thing that relates Sazz to Charles, to the reason she was shot, which is, what did she know about Charles? What was she going to tell him? And to this, we didn't have many answers in this episode because basically everything was about Dudenoff and the twin sisters and all that B-plot stuff that in the end will really not be that much connected with the reason that Sazz was murdered, because it's been like that for the past few seasons. This reason has to start with the chatter at the ham radio and being developed through her investigation, talking to people in LA, at the Hollywood crew community at LA. But the thing is, we know by this point that the stunt community is pretty tight-knit. I mean, they threw a funeral for Sazz, so they knew her very well. And my theory has always been that the biggest clue is about the tap-in that Sazz wrote with her own blood on the floor. And I think this is related to the poker crew and is related maybe to the stuntman and the crew from the Brazos show, to Charles's past. The two targets of the current season are two stunt people. With this movie reference, I think that Glenn could be suspect of something else, but the shooter is the same, so it has to be related to the same issue. Wherever Sazz knew, maybe Glenn also knew. And it goes back to Charles's past. I just think it does. Maybe it doesn't, but that's my theory. So let's think like this. This is East Coast. Oh, this is East Coast. This is West Coast. West Coast, Dudenoff, Arconia, all that business kind of figured out. It's connected through Dudenoff and the sisters, and potentially through Charles living in the Arconia as well, to the west. The West mystery, not figured out yet because it involves Charles, it involves his past, it involves whoever is coming after him to get revenge on him for something. Now, we know that they are not trying to actually murder him because they've been surveilling him for days, potentially weeks, and have done nothing. So what is it? It has to be something in Charles's past, something that someone is getting revenge on, something he did on the Brazos set that he regrets and remembered in that little bit of this current episode and didn't say. There's something here still to figure out. And I think that we're going back to the past in the next episode, because in the next episode we're going to meet who? Charles's sister. So mystery 1, kind of figured out. Connection, figured out. Mystery 2, we will know more about it next episode. So yeah, that is all I have for you today. I have about an hour of footage. It will probably be half an hour video, I think. So not as long as I was anticipating. But yeah, I still want to go back and rewatch all the films because I'm sure the answer is there. Like, I'm sure it's there. But as you have seen, there are a lot of things that connect to this season. And the films are obviously also interconnected with other episodes because we get the reference for Blow Up in episode 5. And we get the Blow Up episode in episode 6. So these things are connected. I wish I had more time to do big deep dives on the movies because I'm pretty sure we could figure out the season from these references. But well, until then, goodbye, my little pearls, peas, and petals. I wish my name started with P right now, because that would have been cool. I will see you on Saturday with Agatha All Along episode 4.